The echoing silence. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, hidden from the world by thick forests and treacherous paths, lay the forgotten town of Hollow Creek. Once a bustling mining community, it was now a ghost town, abandoned nearly a century ago after a series of inexplicable and terrifying events. The town's history was shrouded in mystery, with tales of strange disappearances, eerie noises, and an overwhelming sense of despair that drove the remaining residents away. Jack, a seasoned urban explorer, had heard the stories. He'd explored countless abandoned places, each with its own dark past, and Hollow Creek was no different. At least, that's what he thought. The challenge of uncovering the secrets of the forgotten town was too tempting to resist. So one crisp autumn morning, he set off into the mountains with a backpack full of gear and a heart full of curiosity. The journey was long and arduous. The trail wound through dense forests and rocky outcrops, becoming more treacherous as he neared his destination. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was heavy with moisture, and an unnatural silence hung over the forest. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie stillness that made Jack uneasy. Finally, after hours of hiking, Jack reached the outskirts of Hollow Creek. The town lay before him, shrouded in mist, its buildings crumbling and overgrown. The streets were deserted, the windows of the old houses staring back at him like hollow eyes. A chill ran down his spine, but he shook off the feeling and pressed on, determined to uncover the town's secrets. As Jack walked through the deserted streets, he noticed something strange. There were no signs of life, not even the usual signs of nature reclaiming the land. It was as if the town had been frozen in time, untouched by the elements. The silence was unnerving, so complete that he could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He made his way to the center of town, where the old church stood, its steeple leaning precariously to one side. The doors creaked open as he pushed them, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. The air inside was cold and stale, and the pews were covered in a thick layer of dust. On the floor in front of the altar was a strange, circular pattern burned into the wood. Jack knelt to examine the symbol, running his fingers over the scorched lines. It was like nothing he'd ever seen before, ancient, ominous, and full of a dark energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. As he traced the pattern, a low, almost imperceptible hum began to fill the air, growing steadily louder. Suddenly, the humming stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. Jack stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. The air around him felt heavy, oppressive, as if the walls of the church were closing in. Then, from the shadows at the back of the church, he heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, but unmistakably human. "Leave." The word echoed in the silence, sending a shiver down Jack's spine. He spun around, his flashlight sweeping across the empty pews, but there was no one there. His pulse quickened as he backed away from the altar, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Leave. Now." Panic surged through him as the door to the church slammed shut with a deafening bang. The whispers turned into a cacophony of desperate voices, all telling him the same thing: to leave, to get out, while he still could. But there was no escape. The air grew colder, and Jack felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The shadows in the church began to move, coalescing into ghostly figures that emerged from the darkness. They were transparent, their faces twisted in sorrow and despair. These were the lost souls of Hollow Creek, trapped in an endless loop of torment. One figure, A woman with hollow eyes and long, flowing hair reached out to him. Her voice was a faint echo, as if coming from a great distance. "Help us. Release us." Jack's breath caught in his throat as the figures closed in around him, their cold, spectral hands reaching out to touch him. The whispers grew louder, drowning out all other sound, until Jack could no longer hear his own thoughts. The air became thick, suffocating, as if the town itself was consuming him. In his final moments, as the darkness closed in, Jack realized the truth. Hollow Creek wasn't just abandoned. It was a prison, a place where the dead were trapped and the living who entered were doomed to join them. The town had claimed him, just as it had claimed so many others before. When Jack didn't return the next day, a search party was sent into the mountains. They found Hollow Creek, but there was no sign of Jack. The town was as silent and empty as ever, its secrets buried in the echoing silence of the mountains. And deep within the old church, the whispers continued, waiting for the next soul to wander into their grasp.